Well, hello. Let's work on a landscape painting today using the acrylic glazing technique. I want to show you some more techniques for giving depth and realism to your backgrounds, midgrounds, and foregrounds. So we have those three different elements I want to show you here in this video tutorial today. Before I begin, let me just ask a word of prayer, and then we'll dive right into the process. So Father, I ask a blessing on this painting. Help the students that are watching to benefit from this. I pray it would be a blessing for them, and I pray that this painting would develop more and more in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so this is a painting of my student Deanne. So this is actually a canvas print of her painting, and I'm helping her with it. And I started with a sketch, and that's what I printed off here on a canvas print, and I've been putting some layers on, demonstrating for her and just showing her the next steps, and you as well as you're watching this video. So we've worked on this for a little bit, just developing some of the midground. Now you can see in the reference photo what's happening, and generally you want to make your foreground, midground a little darker than the background. We've got a lot of the atmosphere affecting the colors of the trees and the hills. And one of the big mistakes that beginner painters often make when they're doing landscapes is they tend to make everything the same degree of value and intensity. And they forget that objects in the distance tend to fade, and we want to paint that to make them recede. So we want to use lighter values, we want to use less vibrant colors, and that mimics the effect of the atmosphere dispersing and kind of being a shield, so to speak, to what we're actually seeing in reality. It obscures the vividness of the color that we would perceive if it were very close to us. Well, let's continue with that effect, and keeping that rule in mind, we'll just add some more layers here to this. So now that we've got a good degree of color on here, what I want to do is actually go over with the semi-opaque glaze, and we're going to basically just add some, I'm going to get my white card set up here. Just give me one moment. I've got to make sure we've got this set up here. We're going to add some titanium white and ultramarine blue and phthalo blue, semi-opaque mixture to kind of mute this down even more and decrease some of the contrast we have. Kind of get rid of the the sketch effect. You can still see the pencil lines underneath, so that's going to mute that down even more, and it's going to create a greater sense of depth. So let's do that. For that purpose, I'm going to take a 1-inch flat brush. You can either use an angled or a straight flat, and we will grab some titanium white, and we have the matte medium here. And if you're unfamiliar with that, that is clear acrylic without the pigment. We add titanium white into some matte medium and mix it so that we still have some area that's unaffected by the mixture. Slowly introduce it into this pile of matte medium, and that is going to allow us to control the mixture. Now we go over here, we grab a little bit of ultramarine blue, just kind of set that off to the side. I grabbed a little too much. Pull that into the mix, and a little bit of phthalo blue. Very strong color though, so we have to be careful with that, not to overdo it. Now we pull those two colors into the mixture and control the mixture by drawing from these dabs we put into our mixing area of the palette, rather than grabbing it from the colors on the side. Now we can introduce this in, and we're looking at, I'm actually eyeballing what I see in the reference photo and getting an idea for what the color should be from that, and making sure that what I'm doing matches the overall hue of what we have in the reference photo. Keep in mind too that when you add titanium white, you can compensate by adding a warmer color, which is phthalo blue. But if you were doing this just purely with glazes and no titanium white added, then you would keep the colors more with the ultramarine blue. Anyway, so a mixture of phthalo blue, ultramarine blue. Let's go ahead and add that into the mix. And now let's go ahead and apply this, see what we have. Oh, and I'll show this to you also on my white card. You can see what that looks like there. So just get an idea with the white card. Now let's go ahead and apply this. So see, when we add this glaze, we're going to not only tone the sky, but we're going to mute the background as well. So it kind of accomplishes those two different things. So if you just see a minor change, that's good. That's probably good enough. It's better than going crazy on it and making it splotchy. It's actually easier to control this mixture when it's a little bit more translucent. So translucency is affected by how much matte medium is in the mixture. I would say this is a ratio of maybe about, I would say maybe 30% paint to 70% matte medium, something like that. Okay, so we go ahead and apply that, and there we go. So that kind of mutes the background a little bit more. Now we can come in to the midground and we can do some work on these hills and darken them up. So we can do one of two things. We can either darken the small shapes, that suggests the shadows underneath, the leaves, the little pockets, the crevices that form these little patterns. We can either tackle that, or we can darken the entire area. You always have a choice. You can do one or the other. And you just choose based on flipping a coin. No, I'm kidding. No, you choose based on, seeing what really can use it. I mean, whether this is, too dark or too light, and just see what you need to do next. In this case here, I think actually the whole area can use a glaze because my highlights are a little too light, and my dark values, the little pocket shadows, are dark enough that I can see them. So I'm going to darken the entire complex, the entire shape of this tree and hill section, and that's going to also give it more contrast against the background. So let's do it that way. And for that purpose, let's take a 1/2 inch flat or 5/8 flat, and then we'll start our mix. Now we can pull out of this clear part of the matte medium that doesn't have any of the color in it. I don't think we want to add anything with titanium white in the mix. That's going to muddy it up. So let's kind of start a new mix here. We could actually pull, I guess, from these colors up here too. We'll take some ultramarine blue, a little bit of phthalo blue, and take a little bit of Indian yellow. That's that nice, very vivid yellow. Now just those colors there will be pretty strong, but let's give it more earthiness by adding some raw sienna. And then with that, we should get a really, really nice mix. Really nice color here. So now we want to compare it. I'm looking at my reference photo and asking, well, does this really represent what's on the reference photo? It's a little too warm. It could be just a bit cooler. So I'm going to add a little more ultramarine blue. Okay, and that's going to make it a little cooler in tone, and a little more phthalo blue. So basically we're kind of balancing out the yellow in the mix, and the yellow, of course, would be your Indian yellow and raw sienna. So I like this color overall. I think it should be good. Let's try it out. Now if we don't like it, we can always wipe it off quick, but let's try this out. I think that's good. Yeah, it's got just enough warmth to it. That matches pretty nice. Oh, you want to see it on the white card perhaps? Here we go. There it is on the white card. So you can actually see what the glaze looks like unaffected by the other layers. Okay, back to our painting. So we use short, choppy brush strokes, kind of lift up at the end, and this is how you get a nice smooth application, because it's very frustrating for a lot of painters to deal with acrylic because it dries so quickly. Well, the glazing technique is your solution to that problem. And you'll see how this works so nicely. If you use these short, choppy brush strokes and keep it moving, don't keep brushing your area again and again. Keep that wet edge and just apply it. And if you have a little blotchiness, it's okay, because you will be going over with many layers, and then you have an opportunity to remedy that and smooth it out. So let's really get this paint all the way up to the edge. Want to get it all the way up to the edge of these areas here. Okay, we want to make sure that it's really building up that contrast in the background. And we're going to paint up to the edge of the rocks. There's some rock formations down here. Paint around the boy's hair, but if it goes into the hair, that's fine. We want to, overlap rather than underlap, and that actually can cause more problems if you don't bring that glaze all the way up to the edge. You don't want to have a white halo around his head, because his hair is going to be dark enough and we're going to be overlapping it. So just don't be afraid to go over some of these areas here. Bring it all the way in, and it's okay if you overlap the foreground, because the foreground eventually will overlap over the background again. All right, so just blend this out, blend this out. This area here is a little warmer. We're going to leave that because that should be a lighter value, but we're building up that contrast with this glaze. Now, notice then, the progression. We use a little bit of a warmer color here, because we did have that Indian yellow and raw sienna mixed in, plus, the phthalo blue and a little bit of ultramarine blue, which that's cooler. But the phthalo blue, Indian yellow, and raw sienna warmed that up, and so it stands in contrast to the background, where the background has a higher concentration of ultramarine blue, phthalo blue, and then the titanium white really cools that down and makes the colors and values recede. So again, we have that rule coming into play here with the darker values, more saturated values closer to us, lighter values, cooler values receding in the distance. And keep that rule in thumb. It's going to work wonders for you. However, all rules have their limits. So even though we do generally want it to be darker in value, as we get closer, we don't want to just throw dark values wherever we want, anywhere we feel like we should. We have to follow the reference photo. So for example, when you look at the reference photo, you might think, well, this hill should be darker, right? Because it's closer to us. Well, no. You got to compare it to the midground. It's actually lighter in value than the midground because this is receiving the light. And plus, it's possibly a different kind of foliage. It's grass, it's not leaves, and leaves can get a lot darker in actual color because of the chlorophyll than grass does. So this is lighter in value. You got to follow that rule above the rule I mentioned before. However, where dark values are appropriate, like where you have some shadows in here, in these areas of the flowers, and of course the dog and the boy here, this beautiful picture here of the boy and his dog, well, there we have very, very dark values. And our darkest values in these areas supersede any of the dark values in the midground. You take any of the darkest values there, none of them will be as dark as the fur or his hair. All right, so just something to keep in mind as you're working on a landscape portrait. So that's kind of the idea here, is I'm teaching you how to do, landscapes, but bringing it back to the idea of incorporating it into a portrait, because many of my followers do portrait paintings, and we are asked oftentimes, or desire to do a painting, do a portrait, and also have that realistic landscape in the background of it. So anyway, let's work on the foreground, and we'll finish up with that. We're just kind of cycling between these areas using the glazing technique, background, midground, and foreground. We just cycle back and forth, kind of do our rotations, so to speak. So let's go ahead and grab Really quick, I've got to just spray my palette quick. I got to make sure I turn that speaker off, because when somebody, you know, sends me a message on Messenger, it has that huge, and I just don't care to have that going all throughout this video here. All right, let's go ahead and mix a color for our midground. We'll put it on camera 3 and get our palette in, and we'll take some Indian yellow so we can actually use the color from before, the previous layer, blend it into that. All right, add a little bit more Indian yellow here, and we'll take a little bit of phthalo blue, which is going to make it a nice vivid green. Now you might ask, well, hey, could I just use a different green, like a Viridian green or Hooker's green or whatever? Yeah, you could. I just have always kept my palette simpler, and I found I can pretty much capture any green I want with phthalo blue, Indian yellow, and an ultramarine blue if I want to cool it down. So you can use different greens if you like. That's up to you. I'm going to do it this way. All right, so we're getting that color here, and I'm running out of matte medium, so I need to squirt a little bit of matte medium right into the mixing area, and that way I can make it a little more translucent. Okay, let's do this. This should be good for what we need, and we'll go ahead and apply it. You can see our color on the white card. Now look at that, compare how much more vivid this is than the previous midtone. Okay, this was our background color up here. That was just to kind of tone things down. That semi-opaque blue to go over and almost be like a mist over the background. This is our midtone, and then here's our foreground, and see how much lighter and more vivid that is. Okay, but it's going to add some nice saturation to everything. We'll go ahead and we'll place this with some differentiation. I am looking at my reference photo and just observing where there's areas that are more vivid, and I'm going to pop this color into those areas, so not necessarily over the whole thing. I'm also going to do some vertical brush work to kind of mimic that effect of grass, because it does grow vertically. So let your brush strokes follow suit with what you're trying to portray. That'll help you out a lot. You can brush it first, you know, horizontally, but finish it with vertical strokes and not just straight up. Okay, get them at some angles, some different angles, to kind of get that idea of grass that grows in different directions. So we'll finish up here, kind of block in some colors there, and maybe get a couple of, right in the midground there was a more vivid area. I want to get that in, and then this little area behind the dog, I kind of neglected that, but that actually is supposed to be grass, so we want to get that in too. All right. Make sure we get that in. There we go. All right. So that's good. Yeah, so you can see these changes we make are very small. I mean, you might look at this tutorial and say, man, I can't even see the difference of what you did. But keep in mind, this is just 10, 15-ish minutes. I don't know what we're up to. Maybe it's closer to 20 by now. But, you know, it's just these micro changes, and you're just doing one layer at a time, building the color, building the depth. After you get this foundation in, things start to pick up, and you get a little more opaque with your future layers. But this is how you set things up for a landscape incorporated with a portrait, working on your background, your midground, and your foreground, and how to rotate between those areas. Hey, I hope this video has been helpful for you, giving you some tips you can incorporate in your painting. Try out the glazing technique if you haven't tried it. It's just a beautiful way to take baby steps and create a portrait in a way that's not going to frustrate you with